who really runs the block from behind a steel door. In the vast, sprawling geography of the American urban landscape, power is usually measured by physical presence. We are taught that to control a territory, one must stand upon it, defend it, and be visible within its borders. Yet, a profound and chilling paradox defines the modern American ghetto. The most influential real estate in the neighborhood is often located hundreds of miles away, behind the double-paned glass and reinforced concrete of a maximum security penitentiary. While the world views a prison cell as the ultimate end of a criminal career, for the sophisticated hierarchies of the Bloods, the Crips, and the Chicago-based nations, the cell is not a tomb, it is a corporate headquarters. The street-level soldier, standing on a sun-bleached corner in south-central Los Angeles or a frozen intersection on Chicago's south side, believes he is the master of his domain. He risks his life for a specific zip code, a specific soil, and a specific set of colors. But the reality is far more clinical and detached. He is a low-level operative in a remote-operated asset, governed by a man he has likely never met, who issues life-altering directives from a 6-by-9-foot cage. This is the Prison Street Pipeline, a closed-loop system where the American carceral industry inadvertently provides the very infrastructure necessary for gang leaders to professionalize, centralize, and scale their operations. To understand why the American bloc remains in a state of perpetual conflict, one must stop looking at the corner and start looking at the yard. The remote control block is a systemic reality where the street is merely the storefront, and the prison is the boardroom. This investigation explores how the mechanics of incarceration have not broken the cycle of gang violence, but have instead provided the shot caller with a sanctuary from which to manage the economics and the brutality of the streets with a level of immunity that the average citizen cannot comprehend. To map the anatomy of a contemporary American gang territory, one must first discard the notion of localized, independent groups of troubled youth. The structure is better understood as a franchise model. At the bottom of this pyramid is the soldier, typically an adolescent or young man between the ages of 15 and 24. His primary function is the maintenance of the trap, the point of sale for narcotics, and the physical defense of the set's perimeter. In the context of the Crips, specifically sets like the Rollin' 60s or the Grape Street What's, the soldier is the most vulnerable and the most replaceable component of the machine. Above him is the street boss or shot caller, the individual responsible for the logistical coordination of multiple blocks. However, the true apex of the pyramid exists within the walls of Stateville, Pelican Bay, or ADX Florence. Within these facilities, the leadership of the Black P, Stones, or the Latin Kings maintains a rigid paramilitary hierarchy. This is the board of directors. From the yard, these leaders dictate the universal laws of the organization. They manage the internal judicial system of the gang, issuing green lights for the removal of rivals or sanctions for members who violate the code. This anatomy creates a unique psychological burden for the street-level operative. The soldier on the block is constantly aware that his actions are being monitored and reported back to the general in the yard. The neighborhood is not just a place of residence. It is a surveillance state where every dollar earned and every bullet fired is recorded and analyzed by an invisible governance located in a remote rural prison. This structure ensures that even when a gang leader is removed from the street, the set does not collapse. Instead, it becomes more disciplined, as the leader now has 24 hours a day to focus exclusively on the mechanics of power, free from the distractions of the street's daily chaos. The primary mechanism that bridges the gap between the concrete yard and the asphalt block is the Kite. In the early decades of American gang history, communication was often verbal and localized. However, as the 1980s saw the mass incarceration of gang leadership during the height of the war on drugs, the necessity for a sophisticated communication network became paramount. A kite is a clandestine, coded message, often written on minuscule scraps of paper in microscopic script, then tightly rolled and concealed within the body or hidden in legal documents. For the Bloods, particularly the United Blood Nation, which solidified its structure within the New York prison system at Rikers Island, the Kite became the primary tool for territorial expansion. It carries more than just news. It carries the manifesto. It contains instructions on who is permitted to sell on a specific corner of the South Side, what the tax rate will be for non-affiliated dealers, and how to handle incursions from rival sets. The paradox here is that the more the state attempts to isolate these individuals, the more they refine their communication methods. The Kite has evolved from simple paper notes to legal mail that guards are legally restricted from reading, and eventually into the digital realm via smuggled cellular devices. The harsh reality is that the American prison system, designed for isolation, has become the world's most effective network hub for criminal intelligence. The consequence of this constant stream of intelligence is a street environment where the violence is rarely random. When a high-ranking member of the Black P. Stones in Chicago sends a directive via a kite to the street, it can trigger a coordinated series of events across multiple zip codes. The street-level soldier does not question the order because the kite represents the voice of the nation, a divine command from a leader whose sacrifice in prison has elevated him to the status of a martyr or a king. Beyond communication, the prison street pipeline is fueled by a sophisticated prison tax and a thriving commissary economy. The economics of the American ghetto are often viewed through the lens of poverty, but the trap is a high-yield revenue stream that must be managed. For the Latin kings, the almighty Latin king and queen nation, the hierarchy demands a weekly quota or tax from every member operating on the block. This money is not intended for the soldier's personal enrichment. A significant portion is funneled through smuffing accounts or digital payment apps into the commissary accounts of incarcerated leaders. This creates a circular economy. The street-level drug trade funds the comfort and safety of the leadership behind bars. In prison, commissary is the only true currency. A well-funded account buys protection, better food, clothing, and the loyalty of other inmates. It allows a blood general to live better in a maximum security cell than some of his soldiers live in a dilapidated apartment in East St. Louis. The paradox of power is that the leader's incarceration becomes his greatest asset. He has no overhead, no rent to pay, and a captive audience of subordinates. The harsh reality is that the young man on the corner is not just selling to survive. He is a collection agent for a carceral elite. He is working a job with no benefits and a high probability of death, while his salary is redirected to buy tuna packets, stamps, and protection for a man he will never see. The consequence of this economic drain is the permanent impoverishment of the neighborhood. Capital that could be used for local investment or family stability is instead siphoned out of the community and into the commissary accounts of the prison system, ensuring that the wealth of the block never stays on the block. In the history of Chicago street politics, the Black P. Stones and the conservative vice lords provide the most stark examples of how a remote control block operates. These organizations transitioned from neighborhood clubs to nations with written constitutions and religious undertones, largely due to the time leaders spent in the Illinois Department of Corrections. In the 1970s and 80s, the shot callers realized that the prison yard was the only place where they could meet with rivals and allies without the immediate threat of a drive-by shooting. They used this forced peace to negotiate territorial treaties and price-fixing agreements that would later be implemented on the streets. This is the directive system. A directive can be as simple as a peace treaty between two Crip sets to allow for the smooth transit of narcotics through a disputed corridor, or it can be as brutal as a smash-on-sight order. The paradox is that the state's attempt to cluster gang leaders together to neutralize them actually allowed them to form a Gangsters United Nations. The harsh reality is that the American prison yard is a laboratory for advanced street tactics. Inmates from different regions share intelligence on police surveillance, legal loopholes, and more efficient ways to manage a trap house. The consequence is a professionalization of the soldier. The 18-year-old on the corner today is far more knowledgeable about the mechanics of the legal system and the logistics of the narcotics trade than his predecessors, because he is being educated by veterans via the prison street pipeline. The block is not just a place of commerce. It is an internship for the penitentiary, where the lessons learned behind the fence are applied to the concrete with lethal precision. The ultimate manifestation of this remote governance is the clearinghouse effect of the prison-prison street triangle. When a soldier is eventually arrested and sent to the joint, he does not enter a vacuum. He enters a facility where his set or nation already has a pre-established infrastructure. For a Blood or a Crip, the transition from the street to the yard is often seamless. He is immediately vetted by his incarcerated superiors, and his status on the street determines his role in the prison. If he was a producer on the block, he might be assigned to manage internal commissary taxes. If he was a shooter, he becomes the muscle for the incarcerated leadership. The paradox of the system is that rehabilitation is replaced by recruitment. A young man who enters prison for a minor offense often leaves as a fully indoctrinated general, having spent his sentence being mentored by the highest levels of gang leadership. The harsh reality is that the American prison system provides the only stable, long-term employment track available to many in the ghetto. The gang offers a pension plan of sorts, protection in prison, and a job on the street upon release. The consequence is the self-correcting cycle. The state spends billions to incarcerate the problem, but the incarceration itself is what stabilizes and perpetuates the gang's hierarchy. The leader in the cell needs the soldier on the street to fund his life. The soldier on the street needs the leader in the cell to provide the law and the identity that gives his life meaning. This symbiosis ensures that as long as the prison walls exist, the remote control block will continue to function, turning every American ghetto into a subsidiary of the carceral state. The architecture of this remote governance relies heavily on the concept of the universal law. For organizations like the Chicago-based Gangster Disciples or the Black Disciples, the prison cell is the Supreme Court where the Blue Book or internal constitution is interpreted and enforced. In these structures, the board of directors, sitting in facilities like TAMS or Menard, creates a parallel legal system that mirrors the very state that incarcerated them. When a dispute arises on the streets of Englewood or Chatham regarding drug territory or a perceived slight, it is not resolved by the local police or even the local street boss. Instead, the details are funneled through the pipeline to the high-ranking members behind bars. The paradox of this internal judicial system is that the most lawless areas of the American city are governed by the most rigid sets of rules, all emanating from a place designed for total restriction. The street-level soldier operates under a dual set of laws: the state's penal code, which he ignores, and the gang's constitutional code, which he fears above all else. The harsh reality is that for the young man on the block, the law is something dictated by a man who has spent 20 years in a windowless room. This leader's perspective is frozen in time, shaped by the street politics of a bygone era, yet his rulings have immediate, lethal consequences in the modern day. The consequence of this frozen leadership is a street environment where the violence is often historical rather than practical. A soldier might be ordered to attack a rival set over a grudge that started in a prison yard in 1994, long before the soldier was even born. The block is thus held hostage by the memories and the vendettas of men who are geographically and temporally removed from the community, ensuring that old wars never truly end, and new peace is never allowed to take root. This remote authority is further solidified through the mechanics of the roll call, a process where every member of a set must check in with their incarcerated leadership. In the hierarchy of the Hoover criminals or the 8-tray gangster Crips, visibility within the pipeline is a prerequisite for advancement. When a soldier is active on the street, his deeds, both economic and violent, are recorded and reported back to the yard. This creates a credit score within the organization. A soldier with a high internal credit score is guaranteed protection and status should he eventually be incarcerated. The paradox of the roll call is that it turns the act of committing a crime into a form of career development. In the mind of the soldier, the arrest is not a failure of his criminal career, but a promotion to the headquarters. The harsh reality is that the American ghetto has been conditioned to view the prison as the ultimate stage of manhood and authority. The street is merely the training ground, while the yard is where the true shot callers are forged. This sociological inversion means that the threat of prison has lost its deterrent power. Instead, incarceration has become a rite of passage, a necessary step to attain the rank of general. The consequence is a leadership vacuum on the street that is perpetually filled by the least experienced and most volatile members of the community. As the older, more strategic leaders are moved into the remote control positions in prison, the day-to-day management of the block falls to impulsive teenagers who are eager to build their credit score with the bosses behind the fence. This creates a cycle of hyperviolence where the street is constantly destabilized to satisfy the demands of a distant and detached leadership. The sophistication of this pipeline is most visible in the logistics of the trap. In the American urban landscape, the trap is not just a location for narcotics distribution. It is a node in a massive interstate supply chain. For the Bloods, particularly those affiliated with the United Blood Nation, the coordination of this supply chain often happens through third-party conduits who bridge the gap between the prison and the street. These are often civilians, family members, girlfriends, or clean-skin associates who carry verbal messages and move digital funds. The paradox of the trap is that while the narcotics are sold in the open on a gritty corner in South Central, the profit is managed with the precision of a multinational corporation. The shot caller in the yard uses his cell phone-enabled network to coordinate bulk buys from cartels and distribute them across multiple cities, effectively bypassing local street-level competition. The harsh reality is that the 18-year-old on the corner is a retail clerk in a system that is designed to minimize his profit while maximizing the flow of capital to the incarcerated elite. He takes 100% of the risk for less than 10% of the profit. The consequence of this economic structure is the stagnation of the block. Because the profits are siphoned off to pay for prison taxes and commissary, there is no reinvestment in the neighborhood. The local liquor store, the corner market, and the small businesses that once provided the backbone of the community are replaced by the informal economy of the gang, which produces nothing but debt and trauma. The block remains in a state of arrested development, trapped between the demands of the general in the cage and the indifference of the state outside. As we analyze the generational cycle within this pipeline, we see the true cost of the remote control block. In many American ghettos, the pipeline has become a hereditary system. A young man growing up in the Jordan Downs or Nickerson Gardens projects in Los Angeles may have a father, an uncle, and an older brother all currently incarcerated within the same system. His mentorship comes from collect calls and letters from the yard. He is taught the identity of the set before he is taught the mechanics of a legitimate career. The paradox of this mentorship is that the father figures of the community are providing their guidance from a place of total failure. They are teaching survival from within a cage, yet their words carry more weight than any teacher or social worker. The harsh reality is that for many of these young men, the path to the penitentiary is seen as an inevitable family tradition. The pipeline is not just a structural reality, it is a psychological one. The consequence is the sociological reset of the block every 20 years. As one generation of shot callers grows old in prison, they commission the next generation to continue the war. They pass down the same maps, the same rivalries, and the same universal laws to their sons. This ensures that the boundaries of the Blood and Crip sets remain identical to what they were in the 1970s, even as the world around them changes. The neighborhood is trapped in a permanent 1980s time warp, where the music, the fashion, and the technology might change, but the directives from the yard remain the same. The unifying theory of the American street prison pipeline is that the two environments are no longer distinct. They are a single symbiotic organism. The American carceral system, intended to be a warehouse for the dangerous, has instead become the high-security server that hosts the data and leadership of the street. The block cannot be fixed or rehabilitated through traditional policing because the brain of the organism is not located on the street. It is located in the rural counties where the prisons are built, protected by the very walls meant to contain it. This is the cycle of the cage. The state provides the housing, the food, and the isolation necessary for gang leaders to manage their empires without the daily threat of street-level assassination. In turn, the gang leaders provide the state with a steady stream of inmates by maintaining the conditions of violence and poverty on the street. It is a self-perpetuating machine that consumes the youth of the American ghetto to fuel both the commissary economy and the prison industrial complex. The shot caller believes he is a king within his 6x9 cell, but he is just as much a prisoner of the system as the soldier on the corner. They are both trapped in a game where the only real winners are the architects of the pipeline itself. The philosophical reflection of the street prison pipeline leads to a haunting question. Who is truly free in this system? The soldier on the block is free to walk the streets, yet he is bound by the directives of a man he cannot see. The shot caller in the yard holds the power of life and death, yet he cannot step outside of a steel door. Both are fighting a war for soil that neither of them owns, and both are participants in a ritual of respect that only leads back to the same concrete room. The American ghetto is not just a geographic location. It is a state of mind that has been institutionalized. Until the pipeline is severed, until the kite is grounded and the remote control is broken, the block will continue to be a remote-operated asset, a place where the young are sacrificed to maintain the status of the old, and where the laws of the yard will always override the laws of the land. If you found this investigation into the hidden mechanics of the American street system insightful, consider joining us for our next deep dive by subscribing to the channel. To fully grasp the magnitude of this remote control governance, one must look at the specific history of the United Blood Nation, or the UBN. Unlike the original Los Angeles Bloods, the UBN was born directly within the cell blocks of Rikers Island in the early 1990s. It was a response to the overwhelming dominance of the Latin Kings within the New York City jail system. Two individuals, looking to provide a unified front for African American inmates, codified the 31 rules and the brilliant blood ideology. The paradox of the UBN is that it was a gang created by the prison, for the prison, which then metastasized back onto the streets of the East Coast. When these original members were transferred to various state facilities or eventually released, they carried the New York Blood brand like a franchise agreement. The street-level soldier in a housing project in Newark or a block in Baltimore began following protocols established by men in high-security cells in upstate New York. The harsh reality is that the prison system did not just contain the gang. It served as the original incubator and marketing firm. The consequence of this inside-out expansion is a hyper-centralized structure where every cipher or local chapter must answer to the mother status leadership, many of whom are serving life sentences. This means the violence on an East Coast block is often more bureaucratic than the localized skirmishes of the West Coast. A plate or a hit cannot be authorized by a street boss. It must be vetted through a chain of command that terminates in a cell block. This creates a terrifying efficiency, where the street-level operative acts with the confidence of a man backed by a national legal and military structure, even though he is standing on a corner alone. The mechanical heart of this system has evolved with technology, moving from the physical kite to the digital signal. In the modern American penitentiary, the smuggled cellular device is more valuable than any narcotic. These burners are the literal remote controls of the block. A shot caller in a Georgia state prison or a California facility can now use encrypted messaging apps and video calls to preside over street-level meetings in real time. He can see the faces of new recruits, inspect the inventory of a trap housed via a screen, and listen to the testimony of an accused snitch before delivering a verdict. The paradox of modern incarceration is that total isolation is a myth in an age of ubiquitous connectivity. The high-security wall is no longer a barrier. It is merely a filter. The harsh reality is that the state's inability to keep technology out of the yard has turned the prison cell into a virtual block. The leader is no longer a distant myth. He is a daily presence in the soldier's ear, micromanaging the mechanics of the narcotics trade from 1,000 miles away. The consequence of this real-time management is the elimination of the street boss as an independent actor. The local leader on the corner has been reduced to a middle manager with no autonomy. If he deviates from the directives issued via the digital kite, his own soldiers, who are in direct contact with the prison leadership, will be ordered to remove him. This has created a culture of absolute, terrifying compliance where the ghost in the phone holds more authority than the man with the gun on the corner. Another critical component of the prison street pipeline is the gatekeeper system. Because the leadership is physically separated from the capital they generate, they rely on a network of terrestrial hubs to manage the prison tax. These are often women, mothers, sisters, or girlfriends who have no prior criminal records and can move through the world undetected by traditional gang task forces. These gatekeepers manage the Cash App accounts, the Western Union transfers, and the physical collection of dues from the sets. They are the accountants for the remote control block. The paradox of the gatekeeper is that the most innocuous members of the community are the most vital to the gang's survival. Without the grandmother in the project department who holds the kites and manages the digital ledger, the shot caller in the yard would be powerless. The harsh reality is that the gang deliberately weaponizes the love and loyalty of the family unit to protect its assets. By involving civilians in the movement of money and information, The gang ensures that the entire community has a stake in its survival. If the trap is closed, the gatekeeper cannot send money to the incarcerated son. If the son is not supported, he loses his safety in the yard. The consequence is a total mobilization of the ghetto, where the line between gang member and family member is intentionally blurred. The state, in its pursuit of the shot caller, is forced to target the gatekeeper, leading to the mass incarceration of women and the further destruction of the American urban family structure. The pipeline doesn't just transport criminals. It transports the entire social fabric of the neighborhood into the carceral system. The sanction system represents the final, most brutal aspect of the remote control block. In the world of the Hoover criminals or the Black P Stones, a sanction is an official punishment for a violation of the gang's code. These violations range from skimming off the top of the trap's profits to disrespecting the colors of a superior. Because the shot caller cannot physically enforce his will, the sanction must be public and extreme to maintain the illusion of his omnipresence. A directive is sent from the yard. A specific soldier must be stripped, meaning his status and protection are revoked, or he must be silenced. The paradox of the sanction is that it is often carried out by the victim's closest friends, men who have grown up with him on the same block. The harsh reality is that the remote control leader uses the sanction to test the loyalty of his street-level operatives. By forcing a soldier to kill his own brother on the orders of a man in a cage, the leader breaks the soldier's individual moral compass and replaces it with total institutional loyalty. The consequence is a street environment defined by profound paranoia. Every man on the block knows that his homie might be the one carrying the directive for his demise. This paranoia prevents the formation of any genuine community or resistance to the gang's hierarchy. The block remains a collection of isolated individuals, each more afraid of the voice in the phone than they are of the police or their rivals. The remote control block is not just an economic asset. It is a psychological prison that extends far beyond the barbed wire of the penitentiary. The unifying theory of the American street prison pipeline suggests that we are witnessing the emergence of a carceral feudalism. In this system, the block is the fiefdom, the soldiers are the serfs, and the shot callers in the high-security yards are the lords. The state acts as the unintentional provider of the castles, the prisons, where the lords are safe from the peasant revolts of the street. This cycle is nearly impossible to break because it serves the interests of too many powerful entities. The gangs need the prisons to centralize their leadership and professionalize their ranks. The prison industrial complex needs the gangs to provide a constant population to justify its multi-billion-dollar budget. The trap on the corner of 79th and Halsted in Chicago or the project in South Central is just the entry point into this massive, self-licking ice cream cone. The young man who thinks he is repping his neighborhood is actually just signing up for a life of indentured servitude in a system that views him as a unit of production for the commissary economy. As we look toward the future of the American ghetto, the reflection is somber. The remote control block is a testament to the resilience of human organization, even in the most oppressive conditions. But it is also a testament to the tragedy of a society that has allowed the law of the yard to become the only viable governance for millions of its citizens. The kite will continue to fly, the prison tax will continue to be collected, and the shot callers will continue to issue their directives from the shadows of their cells. The block will never change because it is not being managed by the people who live there. It is being managed by the people who were taken away from it. Until we address the reality that the American prison is the heart of the hood, the cycle of the street will remain as cold and unyielding as the steel doors that define it. If you are interested in more analytical investigations into the hidden structures that define the American urban experience, please consider subscribing to the channel for our upcoming deep dives. To look at the remote control block is to look at a system that has achieved a state of perfect, tragic equilibrium. In the final analysis of the Prison Street pipeline, we must investigate the physical geography of the transfer, the literal movement of bodies that keeps the machine lubricated. In the United States, the prisoner transport bus is the most common sight in the rural corridors between the city and the penitentiary. For gangs like the 7 Mile Bloods or the Black Disciples, these buses are the arteries of the organization. Each transport carries not just inmates, but intelligence, directives, and new recruits, who have been processed through the street-level filters of the neighborhood. The paradox of the transport system is that it serves as the gang's most reliable logistics network, paid for by the taxpayer. The state spends millions to move shot callers from one facility to another in an attempt to disrupt their influence. But in doing so, it only allows these leaders to spread their universal laws to new populations. The harsh reality is that a high-ranking Blood transferred from a facility in Northern California to one in the South is not being isolated. He is being given a new territory to franchise. The consequence of this mobile leadership is the nationalization of street gang culture. A set that once existed only on a single street in Los Angeles can now find its colors and its codes being adopted in rural Ohio or the suburbs of North Carolina, simply because a single shot caller was moved through the pipeline. The block is no longer a localized community. It is a node in a national carceral grid. The unifying theory of this investigation suggests that the American ghetto and the American prison have merged into a single urban carceral complex. It is a landscape where the fence and the sidewalk are indistinguishable in their function. In this complex, the shot caller is not a criminal mastermind in the traditional sense, but a high-level administrator of a state-sanctioned headquarters. He provides the order and the discipline that the prison system itself often fails to maintain. Within the walls, the leadership of the Latin Kings or the Black P. Stones maintains a piece of the yard that keeps the facility running, and in exchange, they are often granted a level of informal influence that allows them to continue their remote control of the streets. This is the symbiotic organism. The gang needs the prison to maintain its hierarchy and safety. The prison needs the gang to manage the internal population. The soldier on the street, standing on a corner in the south side of Chicago, is the external limb of this organism. He is the one who gathers the nutrients, the street-level capital, and feeds them back into the carceral heart. This cycle is nearly impossible to break because it has become the fundamental economic and social structure of the neighborhood. To remove the gang would be to collapse the only form of governance, however brutal, that many of these communities have ever known. This leads to the sociological reset of the American street. Every generation, the system clears the deck. The old shot callers eventually pass away in their cells, their names becoming legends that are whispered in the project hallways. Their directives are codified into the history of the set, becoming the new scripture for the incoming teenagers. The 18-year-old on the corner today is not just fighting for his own life. He is fighting to preserve the legacy of a man who died in Pelican Bay before the boy was born. He is a living ghost, acting out a script written decades ago in a prison cell. The paradox of this legacy is that it offers the soldier a sense of immortality. He believes that by following the kite and paying the prison tax, he is becoming part of something larger than his own impoverished reality. The harsh reality is that he is merely a disposable asset in a game where the rules are designed to ensure his eventual incarceration or death. The respect he seeks is a currency that can only be spent in the yard, and the power he craves is a remote control that is never truly in his hands. The consequence is a haunted block, where the living are governed by the dead and the incarcerated, and where the hope for a different future is systematically suffocated by the demands of the past. The philosophical reflection of the remote control block forces us to confront the nature of power itself. We often assume that power is the ability to move freely and act upon the world. But in the American ghetto, power is the ability to remain present even when you are absent. The shot caller in the high-security cage is the most present person on the block. His name is on the walls, his rules are in the minds of the youth, and his kites determine who eats and who starves. He has achieved a form of digital and spiritual omnipresence through the pipeline. Yet this power is a trap. He is a king of a kingdom he can never visit, a man who commands thousands but cannot walk to a grocery store. The soldier on the street is his mirror image, a man who can walk anywhere but has nowhere to go, a man who owns the block but cannot change a single brick of his own destiny. They are two halves of a broken system, bound together by a steel cord that stretches from the corner to the cell. The American prison street pipeline is the ultimate expression of a society that has chosen containment over connection. By building walls around the problems of the ghetto, We have only succeeded in creating a headquarters for their expansion. The Kite will continue to fly because it is the only way the shot caller can remain human. The prison tax will continue to be paid because it is the only way the soldier can remain safe. The remote control block is a mirror of our own failure to provide a different path, a different law, and a different future. Until the pipeline is seen for what it is, a self-perpetuating engine of trauma and control, the American bloc will remain a remote-operated asset, and the voice of the yard will continue to drown out the voice of the community. If you are interested in further analytical explorations into the mechanics of the American street system and the sociology of the ghetto, please consider subscribing to Tales from the Block to support our future investigations.